Let's do that again. Let's do that again. All right, what's up, team? Happy whatever day it is that you happen to be watching this. You're tuned in with JT Taylor, career coach and career professional in the IT field for over 10 years. So a few questions in my coaching. I had a presentation recently, and some people had some follow-up questions. These four here. So I'll just go over some of these high-level interview questions that were covered in one of my presentations that people wanted some additional detail about. So let's get right into it. Common questions that you will receive. Almost 100% of the time, you will receive a flavor of the following question. Why are you leaving your current job? This will also be disguised as, why do you think you're the right candidate, right? Or why are you looking for another position? They say it in different ways, but essentially it drives at the same thing, right? Why are you leaving and why do you want to work here? Even if they don't specifically ask you, why do you want to work here? Always say what it is. So if they do ask you the short question, why are you leaving your current job? Do not spend 100% of the time talking about why you're leaving, right? It could be something small, and then transition that into what you're actually looking for. And if you can make it match with the position that you're interested in and that you're interviewing for, all the better, right? Because then you can call back to that later on in the interview, but I'll get into that detail a little bit later. So two-part answer is the way you want to look at this. Leave it at 20%, a small percentage, maybe one or two sentences. Looking to leave my current position because I'm looking for additional challenges. Everybody says that. That's a very, very common answer. You could start that way. Looking for some additional challenges. And when I did, I came across your A, B, and C company. Say, for instance, let's use an AI company, right? I've been getting really interested in AI. I was selected to be part of a group testing out some AI software, and it really piqued my interest. So I started looking for different companies that were emerging that do this really, really well. When I went to your website, I noticed that you all do a lot when it comes to your mission and the products and the people that you're providing the space for, right? I'm making this up as I go, but if you think about it, most companies, almost all companies have a reason why they exist, and you really want to drive at that in your answer, right? So maybe they want to solve business solutions, right? Maybe they want to create an ecosystem, right? Some companies are very, very mission focused, very mission based, and find out what that mission is, right? And then talk about if that aligns with your personal goals and your personal mission, right? Maybe they just believe in transparency. There's one particular company that I've worked for. That was their big thing. They have their handbook online. They have a lot of their information online. They're very accessible, right? So looking for different things in the company's actual culture that matches with what you're looking for, what you would appreciate as an employee, is a surefire way to set yourself aside from everybody else that's interviewing for it. Because I can guarantee you, most people are going to say, my job has gotten stagnant. I'm looking for another challenge, but that doesn't really say much about the company that you're actually applying for. So if you want to stand out, make sure that you spend most of your time in this area, right? And a little bit of time right here. I would even also add a bonus. If you start with your why you want to look for another company, that could tell you why you're looking for a different position, right? So, I came across your company. I wasn't really looking in the first place, right? I came across your company, or somebody reached out, or a friend of mine had told me about it, and I started looking into it, and this is what I found: A, B, and C, right? And I, understood that I wasn't getting that same type of challenge in my current role. So I wanted to go ahead and apply for the position to see if this would be the next logical step in my career development, my career or personal development, or a little bit of both, right? So calling that out up front is an easy way to get you to understand, or to get the interviewer to understand what makes you tick. What's special about you, right? I'm talking to 10 people today, and they're all going for the same position. How does Joe or Jane stand out, right? If you look at the second question, it's going to be similar, right? What are you looking for in your next role? You can actually cover that with this answer. So you would probably, if you get both questions, which is very, very rare, but if you get both questions, why are you leaving your current job and what are you looking for in your next role? And that means you probably didn't answer the first one correctly, right? And that's okay. But you want to make sure that you're providing this full answer, because you'll be able to tell them more or less what you're looking for in your next role, or what it is about the role that they're providing that, that attaches to your thought process. So let's move on to the next. Tell us about a conflict. This is one of my favorite questions because it lends to one of the most important things when people are looking for positions to fill, or at least I am, and most people that I've worked with on interview panels. How does this person communicate, right? And this says a lot about your personality and what kind of employee you are, and what kind of team member, more importantly, that you are. The biggest thing for one of these conflict questions, or how do you resolve conflicts, they'll say a bunch of different ways, or how do you deal with change, right? Say there was a change at your company. They'll ask you something like, hey, tell me about a time that there was a change at your company that you didn't necessarily agree with. And what did you do about it, right? It puts you on the defensive automatically. So relax, right? And the first thing that you need to do is understand the situation. And the best way to do that is through open communication, right? Ask questions, speak up, right? A lot of times people will say all the right things, they get hired, and then things start changing, or they have an issue with a colleague or somebody that's on the team that's maybe more senior. And then now they're reaching out to the manager every time that they have a complaint. That's not a healthy format for the person, and not for the team as well, because then you start to separate yourself. And employers have seen this a number of times, right? That's why they ask this question, to see how do you deal with conflict, right? And the best way is to have that open communication. So if it's with you and another coworker, if you want to use an example like that, speak to them, right? Talk to them directly, right? You don't have to go to your manager for every single thing. We want to hire people for these roles that can handle some of their own issues. I want to make sure that I'm doing what's right for the business as a manager. So in order to do that, I have to be able to focus on that. Not every employee who is having an issue with somebody else, right? You're going to meet a lot of different personality types. There's going to be a lot of collaboration in between teams. And every now and then there's going to be a little bit of friction, right? Now, I'll cover if you cannot, or if there is a big issue, it's probably not the example that you want to use, right? So make sure it's something that's solvable. Make sure it's something that might be easily solved with just some open communication. That's an easy way to answer this question, right? Seeking to understand. So coming from curious, I learned this from a position that I've had before, and they trained us on what types of data points we were looking for whenever we asked this question. And one of the statements was, is this person naturally curious? Like, this would be our assessment of that employee or potential employee or interviewee, candidate, etc. Right? Is this person naturally curious? Do they seek to understand, or do they seek to prove people wrong? So you don't always have to be right. You can be proven wrong and still get this question right. You just have to be level. You have to have a level mindset enough to admit that you're wrong, and or to admit that you might not know everything, and that the answer is somewhere in between what you think and what the other person that you have the conflict with thinks. If there's a major change for an organization, taking it at a larger level, then same exact thing applies, right? Have that open communication with your leadership. Seek to understand, why is the company making this change, right? And sometimes it's just, hey, it's a change that's being made. Okay, I understand that, but I at least understand a little bit more than what I did when it was first being delivered. So maybe it helps them with their messaging to other employees. Hey, I think it would be a great idea if we also add this messaging, because I was confused about this change and what it entailed. So maybe other people are confused about the same thing, right? And then also, for both ends, provide data points, right? So if you do strongly disagree with whatever it is that's being presented to you, in your example, provide some data that shows why we might want to relook at this, right? That shows leadership, right? That's somebody that can actually make a change. So a lot of people say this on their resume: hey, I'm a change leader, I'm a thought leader, I've done this, I've implemented change. Okay, we'll prove it, right? Talk to me about I had to pause there, but anyway, talk to me a little bit about how you implement that change, right? What kind of data points do you use? What kind of information do you get from the team? And how do you make a case, right? This also lends to how influential are you as a person, right? Can you influence change and make impact? And a lot of employers are looking for those types of leaders, right? The last one. So, have you broken production? This is for the folks that eventually get to a technical interview. So you're not guaranteed to get a question like this, but you will get something similar. Either, have you broken production? Have you made a mistake? Have you had an error before? If so, how you got over it? So I'll approach this from two different ways. I'll try not to read through every single bullet point. But obviously you want to choose something that's relevant to the case at hand, right? Whether it's if you're applying for an engineering position or project management or anything that resolves around soft skills. How do you deal with a challenge is really, and how adaptable are you when things go bad, which IT and technology, they always do. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when, right? So how do you thrive in that kind of situation? Can you survive in that kind of situation, right? And walk us through your thought process whenever that happens. So how this might look, have you broken production? Be really honest, be open, and be humble about what it was. Things happen all the time, right? You can use a small example just to give you an idea of what I mean by that. Hey, I was, in charge of the deployment process for a specific project. When I approved the deployment, I did not realize that the person that was asking for the requirement should not have had the permissions that they had to even open the pull request. This is a little bit more of a technical example, right? So I approved the deployment, right? And when there was a bug in the deployment, I was wrong for that, but I was also wrong for not double checking that person's permissions. Make sure that they should not have been able to even create the PR. It should have come from their leadership. This happened earlier in my career, and now I take my time whenever I'm approving something and write detailed notes. And if I am in a situation where I have joined a company and they don't have that practice, that's something that I definitely raise my hand about to suggest, so that way we can have clean code and avoid that situation altogether. So a couple of things. I just made this up right now just to give you an idea of how easy it is to answer some of these questions, right? Because what you're really looking for is keeping it concise, like the list says here. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm taking responsibility, right? I could have very easily have said, well, they should have had the permission, or it should have been correct before I was, assigned to do this, right? And my assumption was that it was correct. And that could be also right, but that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the fact that what I could have actually have done, right? So I said, hey, it was my issue where I did not realize this. So I was wrong on two parts, and breaking those down and taking that accountability. And what I've learned from this is now when I join new teams is to check for their best security practices. So now I've actually turned what I learned into something that is a best practice for me as somebody who is responsible for whatever the task is. In this case, approving deployments, but it could be anything. Right. So if I thought of a soft skills example, maybe it's something that's related to a project, right? There was a deliverable that was missed. And on my end, I came to realize that the way that I was structuring and organizing my work made it really overwhelming to be able to keep up with some of the tasks that were provided, because we were a small team. Everybody was really, really busy. Wasn't always able to delegate work the way that I would prefer. And I wanted to make sure that everything was done right. So in doing so, I looked at a lot of the details, but didn't also take a look at the big picture to make sure that all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted, right? And with that, I missed one of the deliverables. So what I've done is I've actually implemented a practice for myself in between the sprint where I double check all of the tasks that are remaining. And that has helped me tremendously within my career. It's now a best practice that I have that I've also taught to other project managers, just to make sure that we're staying on top of our tasks. I now set calendar reminders to remind myself of those individual tasks, especially the ones that have dependencies that other people are looking for that I don't need to do right there in the moment, but they need to get done by a certain date. I just made that up again, right? And we use the example here that I got online during a recent deployment. I accidentally deployed code change that caused a minor performance issue. Quickly identified the problem to work with the team to implement a more robust process. So if you think about my examples that I just made up and you look at this one, it's the same exact thing, right? Concise, it gets to the point. It also takes accountability, and then it talks about what happened afterwards. So what are my steps afterward? Do I complain about it? Do I just make a big deal? Or do I, implement change? And when I said earlier that I was going to give you all, a little additional tidbit. So if you do this portion correctly, when you talk about why you're leaving your job and the things that you want to do, and say, for instance, you add something like, I like to innovate. I like to challenge myself by creating new things. Whenever you get to some of these other questions, you can tie that back into, that little bit about yourself. And now the interviewer has a much bigger understanding of who you are as a person, an employee, and also potentially as a leader. right? This is how, whenever you get to the negotiation table and they say, hey, we're going to offer you X amount of dollars, I'll just say 100,000, for example, where you can ask for a little bit more money because now you actually have proven where there is value, right? There's value in you saying, hey, this is what I like to do, and this is where I see myself. There's value in saying how I openly communicate and work with team members. And there's definitely value in saying, hey, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, and this is what I'm doing about those mistakes. And this is how it has helped me in my career. So overall, whenever you're answering that question, you sound way more like an experienced leadership type person, and those people usually get the big dollars, right? That's just the way that it works out. So if you have any questions, reach out to me directly. If you have any comments, I'm open to those as well. Follow up topics that you'd like for me to cover in these shorter sessions. I'll be more than happy to make some future videos that are similar to this one, just based on some of those questions that you all provide. But with that being said, there's no shine without the grind, baby. So get to it. Hopefully I'll see you in the job market on your next interview. Peace.